Some places aren't haunted by ghosts. They're haunted by memory. Tonight, we're stepping back into the strange, empty worlds of Super Mario 64 to uncover why forgotten hallways, silent castles, and impossible spaces leave millions with a feeling they can't explain. This is Tapes of the Lost. I'm Luther. Let's begin.
There are certain places that almost everyone recognizes. An empty shopping mall after closing, a school hallway during summer vacation, a hotel corridor in the middle of the night. Nothing appears to be wrong. The lights are on. The building is intact. There are no monsters hiding around the corner. And yet, something feels off. Psychologists often describe these places as liminal spaces, locations that exist between one state and another. Places designed to be temporary, places meant to be full of people, that suddenly aren't. For reasons researchers are still exploring, these environments often produce an unusual emotional response. They're familiar, yet strangely unfamiliar, comforting, yet unsettling. Many people experience a similar feeling while revisiting older video games, especially games released during the late 1990s. At first, the explanation seems simple. Technology was primitive, graphics were limited, worlds were sparsely populated. But that answer only explains part of the story, because millions of players have independently described almost the exact same feeling. They return to games they loved as children, only to discover that those worlds now feel oddly abandoned, almost dreamlike, as if they were exploring memories rather than places. No game represents this phenomenon better than Super Mario 64. Released in 1996 for the Nintendo 64, it revolutionized gaming. It introduced millions of players to fully three-dimensional exploration. It inspired generations of developers. And somehow, without ever intending to, it also became one of the internet's most recognizable examples of a liminal space. But to understand why, we first need to understand why our brains react so strongly to empty places. The word liminal comes from the Latin word limen, meaning threshold. It describes a place that exists between two different states. Not quite here, not quite there. Think about an airport. People are constantly passing through. Almost no one intends to stay. Its purpose is transition. The same is true for hotel hallways, parking garages, stairwells, school corridors between classes. These are places built for movement, not permanence. Now imagine those same places completely empty. No conversations, no footsteps, no activity. The purpose of the space suddenly feels incomplete. Your brain immediately notices. Researchers who study environmental psychology believe our minds are constantly comparing what we expect to see with what is actually present. When those expectations don't match reality, our attention increases. The environment feels unusual, not because it's dangerous, but because it violates our expectations. Video games unintentionally recreate this experience, especially older games. Technical limitations prevented developers from filling every hallway with characters. Memory restrictions meant music often stopped unexpectedly. Large areas remained almost completely empty. Developers weren't trying to create loneliness. They were working within the limitations of hardware available at the time. Ironically, those limitations accidentally produced environments that modern audiences now describe as haunting. The worlds feel inhabited, without anyone actually living there, like abandoned memories frozen in time. And nowhere is that feeling stronger than inside Peach's castle. When most people think of Super Mario 64, they remember colorful worlds, bob-ombs, penguins, snowy mountains, lava, flying through the sky. But before any of that, players enter Peach's castle. It should feel welcoming. Instead, Many players describe the exact opposite. The castle is enormous. Its ceilings stretch high above polished marble floors. Long hallways connect empty rooms. Paintings line the walls in complete silence. The only sounds are Mario's footsteps, echoing through corridors that seem far larger than necessary. There are remarkably few characters inside. Princess Peach is absent. Toads appear only occasionally. Most rooms are completely empty. Locked doors suggest life beyond them, yet almost none ever open. Even as children, many players hurried through the castle without stopping. As adults, they often find themselves slowing down, listening, looking, wondering why such an iconic location feels so isolated. Part of that feeling comes from the sound design. Unlike many modern games, there isn't constant background music filling every moment. Instead, silence becomes part of the experience. Every footstep echoes. Every jump reverberates through the halls. The castle feels less like a home and more like an enormous museum after closing. Then there's the courtyard. Hidden behind a simple door lies one of the quietest locations in the game. A stone fountain, dark trees, still water, a handful of boo ghosts. No music, just wind and silence. For countless players, this area produces a feeling that's difficult to describe. Nothing frightening actually happens. There are no jump scares, no terrifying enemies, and yet, many people choose to leave almost immediately. The space simply feels uncomfortable. Nintendo almost certainly never intended this reaction. Yet decades later, the castle has become one of the internet's defining examples of digital liminality. Not because it's haunted, but because it feels like a place waiting for something that never arrives. If Peach's castle is the heart of the liminal space discussion, the underwater levels are where that feeling becomes something even more personal. There is a reason so many players who grew up with the Nintendo 64 remember these stages more vividly than almost any others. Not because they were the most difficult, but because they made us feel vulnerable. Long before players understood concepts like environmental psychology, they understood what it felt like to lose control. The moment Mario entered deep water, everything changed. Movement slowed, gravity seemed to disappear. Simple actions suddenly required careful planning. Even the music became softer, almost distant, as though the world itself had moved farther away. Take Jolly Roger Bay. At first glance, it isn't especially threatening. The water is calm. The cave is quiet. Sunlight filters down through the surface. But beneath that calm exterior lies one of gaming's most memorable moments, the eel. Hidden deep inside a shipwreck, it remains perfectly still until disturbed. Nothing about its design is especially realistic by modern standards. Yet for countless players, simply approaching the creature created genuine anxiety. Why? Part of the answer lies in uncertainty. Our brains naturally fear what we cannot fully predict. The eel barely moves. It doesn't attack immediately. It simply watches. The silence surrounding it allows the player's imagination to do the rest. The same feeling appears in Dire Docks. Unlike many Mario levels, there are long stretches where almost nothing happens. You swim through enormous open spaces with little to guide your attention except distant walls and slowly moving currents. There are no crowds, no bustling activity, only water, echoes, and isolation. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as environmental ambiguity. When a location provides very little information, our brains begin searching for patterns. We become more alert, more cautious, more aware of every sound. That heightened awareness often feels like fear, even when no actual danger exists. Another factor may be something many people experience outside of gaming: fear of deep water. Researchers have long studied why oceans, lakes, and underwater environments make some individuals uncomfortable. limited visibility, restricted movement, the inability to clearly see what lies beneath. These factors combine to produce a heightened sense of vulnerability. Without intending to, Nintendo recreated many of those same conditions inside a children's platform game. The result wasn't horror, it was uncertainty. And uncertainty often lingers much longer than fear itself. While Super Mario 64 has become the internet's most recognizable example of liminal gaming, it was far from the only one. Throughout the late 1990s, developers across the industry were unknowingly creating worlds that modern audiences would later describe as dreamlike. One of the clearest examples appears in The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Hyrule Field is enormous, especially by 1998 standards. Yet much of it is empty. Long stretches of open grass separate towns and landmarks. As children, players experience those spaces as grand adventures. As adults, many describe them as strangely lonely. The game's technical limitations prevented the landscape from feeling crowded. Instead, players often traveled through silence, broken only by distant music and the sound of footsteps. Then came locations like the Shadow Temple, the bottom of the well, ancient ruins that felt abandoned long before the player arrived. Unlike traditional horror games, these environments rarely relied on sudden scares. They relied on atmosphere, the suggestion that something terrible had happened long before you entered. Another fascinating example is The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. Although remembered for its darker themes, the game rarely frightens players through violence. Instead, it creates unease through inevitability. The moon slowly descends. Characters repeat daily routines. Time itself becomes the source of tension. Every familiar location changes slightly with each passing day. Players are never allowed to become completely comfortable. Then there's Banjo-Kazooie. On paper, it should be one of the happiest games of its generation. Bright colors, cartoon characters, playful music. Yet many players remember moments of unexpected loneliness. Gruntilda's lair stretches deep beneath the mountain, connecting isolated worlds through quiet corridors and echoing chambers. The further players descend, the more detached they become from the cheerful opening of the game. Even Pokémon Red and Blue created one of gaming's most unforgettable examples of emotional atmosphere. Lavender Town, its music, its cemetery, its quiet conversations about loss. Many internet myths later exaggerated the town into something supernatural. In reality, its impact came from something much simpler. It was one of the first moments many young players encountered death inside a video game. That emotional shift remained with them long after they turned the Game Boy off. Looking back today, these games share remarkably similar qualities: large spaces, minimal dialogue, sparse populations, ambient sound, technical limitations. None were designed around the concept of liminal spaces. The term wasn't even widely used when they were released. Yet decades later, millions of players independently reached the same conclusion. These worlds felt different, not because they contained hidden horrors, but because they felt suspended between memory and reality. By now, a pattern begins to emerge. The games we've discussed weren't trying to frighten players. Most were designed to be colorful, imaginative adventures for children. So why do so many adults return to them decades later with an entirely different emotional response? The answer may have less to do with the games, and far more to do with how memory works. Memory is not a perfect recording. Every time we remember a place, our brain quietly reconstructs it. Small details disappear. Certain moments become exaggerated. Emotions become attached to locations. Over time, childhood memories begin to resemble dreams more than photographs. When players return to games like Super Mario 64, they aren't simply revisiting a video game. They're revisiting a place they haven't seen in 20 or 30 years. Their adult brain immediately notices things their childhood brain ignored. The castle feels emptier. The music seems quieter. The rooms appear larger. Hallways that once took only seconds to cross now feel strangely long. Many psychologists believe this happens because our perception of scale changes dramatically as we grow older. Everything seems enormous when we're children. Schools, shopping malls, our grandparents' houses. Then we revisit those same places years later, and they're smaller than we remembered. Old video games often produce the opposite effect. Because of their simple geometry and sparse design, they feel larger, more isolated, almost impossible to fully understand. Then there's another fascinating phenomenon: dream logic. Think about your last vivid dream. Did every room make sense? Did every hallway lead somewhere logical? Probably not. Dreams often contain oversized buildings, empty streets, strange lighting, and places that feel familiar despite never existing. Coincidentally, early 3D games often share those exact characteristics, not because developers intended them to, but because the hardware demanded it. The Nintendo 64 had severe technical limitations by modern standards. Developers had to conserve memory wherever possible. Draw distance was limited. Textures were low resolution. Objects appeared only when the player moved close enough. Fog often hid the edge of the world. Rooms existed only when needed. Everything beyond the player's immediate surroundings simply ceased to exist until the game loaded it, without realizing it. Developers accidentally created environments that resemble the fragmented way humans remember places. The worlds feel incomplete, not broken, just unfinished, exactly like memories. For years, these feelings remained largely personal. Players might occasionally tell a friend that Peach's castle felt strange. Someone else might mention Lavender Town. Another person admitted they always rushed through the basement, but there was no common language to describe the experience. Then the internet changed everything. As online communities grew during the late 2000s and early 2010s, people began posting screenshots of empty hallways, vacant shopping malls, abandoned offices, and quiet playgrounds. Eventually, a single phrase emerged: liminal spaces. Suddenly, millions of people realized they weren't alone. The strange feeling they had experienced for years actually had a name. Almost immediately, classic video games entered the conversation. Players began sharing screenshots from Super Mario 64. The castle, the courtyard, the basement, the endless staircase. Each image generated thousands of comments. Many people described exactly the same emotional response. I don't know why this makes me uncomfortable. This feels like a dream. I remember this looking different. It feels abandoned. The conversations soon expanded beyond psychology. Internet folklore began developing around these locations. One of the most famous examples became the phrase, "Every copy of Mario 64 is personalized." Originally created as an internet creepypasta, the story imagined that every cartridge secretly changed itself, depending on who was playing. According to the fictional narrative, hidden rooms, impossible events, and unexplained characters existed beyond the normal game, waiting for certain players to discover them. Of course, there is no evidence that any of this is true. The story was created as collaborative internet fiction, but its popularity reveals something fascinating. People were already searching for an explanation. The games felt strange. The internet simply supplied a mythology. Other stories followed. The mysterious Wario apparition meme. Claims of impossible levels, hidden messages, secret rooms beyond the castle walls. Most began as jokes, artwork, or fictional stories. Yet they spread because they perfectly match the emotional atmosphere players already associated with these games. The folklore wasn't created first. The feeling came first. The myths came afterward. Perhaps that's why these stories continue to resonate. not because people believe they're real, but because they express something difficult to describe. The feeling that somewhere inside those old cartridges, there is still one room, one hallway, or one forgotten corner waiting to be explored. Perhaps Super Mario 64 was never unsettling at all. Perhaps Nintendo simply built the best three-dimensional world they could with the technology available in 1996. A castle, some paintings, a quiet courtyard, a handful of characters, nothing more. But time has a way of changing how we experience familiar places. The children who once raced through those hallways are adults now. The games haven't changed, we have. Our memories filled in details that were never actually there. Our imaginations transformed technical limitations into atmosphere. And the internet gave those feelings a name, liminal spaces. In the end, the mystery isn't hidden inside the game, it's hidden inside us. Why do empty places feel meaningful? Why do forgotten worlds feel nostalgic? Why do silent hallways remind us of childhood? There may never be a single answer, but perhaps that's exactly why these games continue to fascinate us. Not because they're haunted, not because they're cursed, but because they capture something remarkably rare. A moment in time, frozen forever, waiting patiently for someone to press start one more time.
Maybe it was never just a game. Maybe those empty rooms, endless corridors, and familiar sounds became a part of us. A reminder of a time we'll never get back. If this journey into liminal spaces stayed with you, subscribe to Tapes of the Lost. Until next time, keep searching the forgotten places. Because sometimes, the strangest mysteries are the ones we've already lived through.